Hi, my name's AJ Goldsby. I'm a life master from Pensacola, Florida, and I'm coming to you today to bring you the third part in my video series on the game between Wesley So and Grandmaster Alexei Shirov. Both players are grandmasters. I've already covered this game in two parts. I've already done the first two parts of this video series. This is part three of my video series, and I'm just going to quickly run through the game and try to pick up the game where I left off at the last time. Just quickly going through the game, it starts off d4, d5. It's a Slav. White plays 5b3, which is a rather unusual move here. Running on through the game, White played knight e5. This is placing a knight on the very powerful, strong central square e5, grabbing the center. Shirov probably should have simply castled here. That almost certainly was his best move at this point. The engines will verify that. But Shirov, being the type of player that he is, combative, he fights for every inch of the chessboard, he's ingenious, he decides to immediately take measures to try to kick this knight out of e5. Of course, black can't simply play knight takes knight, because if white retakes with a pawn, then we have a pawn fork there. But what, or bishop takes knight might even give up the bishop pair. What Shirov does is plays bishop b4 check, white plays knight d2, and now again Shirov can simply castle, but what he decides to do is immediately exchange off the knight on his e5 square. Knight takes knight e5, d takes e5, knight d7, and this is pretty much where we left off in part 2. And here we'll pick up our detailed analysis with part 3. Here, Grandmaster Wesley So shows a deep understanding of chess. You can learn the game very quickly and pick up things like control the center and develop your pieces rapidly. A beginner can pick those up in not too much time, but learning to apply those can literally take years of practice. And Grandmaster Wesley demonstrates that he has a much deeper understanding of chess than simply the simple rules of chess and the principles of chess. Here he understands that the chess board is made up of 4 basic elements, which is basically space, time, force, and material. And he takes a pause. White could simply castle now and have a very nice advantage, and the chess engines will confirm that. But what Wesley does is he plays a3, kicking that bishop on b4. Now black has a crucial decision to make. Either he has to retreat his bishop and lose time, or he has to exchange off the bishop, play bishop takes, capture this knight on the d2 square, and lose several tempo there, and also cede white the bishop here. Shirov retreats his bishop to a5, and now white simply castles. At this point, white has a very clear, a very nice advantage out of the opening. I think there's no question that white's better. It's plus over equals, maybe even plus over a line. But certainly white has a very solid advantage at this point. And probably once more, black should simply castles. But Shirov decides he doesn't want to play the rest of that game with white's huge pawn advantage, and he doesn't want to leave that pawn on e5 sitting there any longer than possible, because this pawn, really, though it's a double pawn, it literally cuts the chessboard in half. Basically, black has to, everything he does on this side of the chessboard over here and this side of the chessboard over there, he really can't make side-to-side movements because of white's pawn on e5. So that pawn has a very cramping effect, and because of that reason, Shirov decides he wants to immediately get rid of this pawn. He plays f6. Now, needless to say, that's exclamation question, maybe even slightly dubious move here, as it's going to confer on white a very large advantage. However, again, that's the type of player that Shirov is, and I believe he already has a plan here. He already has the plan that he demonstrates in this game. So he's not played these moves thoughtlessly. He's just simply, he gets into trouble by trying to do too much. But that's understanding the type of player he is. Very few players, human players, play like a chess engine. I would say probably the only exception to that would be Kasparov at his very best. Sometimes seemed to play almost like a chess engine, just relentless invincibility, marching from victory to victory until the opponent lays down the king. Very few players play like that, like a chess engine. And what Shirov tries to do here is he tries to get white to exchange off his pawn. He plays f6. Now white plays knight f3. That's a very simple move, and just simply continue to bring up the forces here. Another former chess student had written me, he suggested the idea of b4 and queen h5 check, but black can simply play queen f7, and in that case, if the queens get exchanged, I'm not sure that white can exploit his advantage, or if he's really going to have enough of an advantage to win. I think the way that white has to keep his advantage is he has to keep pieces on the board, especially the queens, and try to continue to increase his advantage and force black at some point to cede material. I don't think white's advantage is enough to win by force yet. Certainly if it was, I'm sure a player of Wesley So would have found that idea, and also I would have found that idea when analyzing with the chess engines. Anyway, white plays knight f3, black plays bishop c7. Now it's easy to see that pawn on the e5 square is attacked more times, and since white has no way of bringing that pawn more support to that pawn, he has to exchange it off. White plays e takes f6 on the 14th move, and black recaptures with the knight. And that was pretty much forced. Now, I did have one user, he's from the Chess Games website, and it wasn't in an ugly way, but he wrote me a simple email, and he said basically that he felt like knight takes f6 was a mistake, and he included a little bit of analysis that he did. He had about a page and a half of some notes that he had taken down, but basically his idea was that knight takes f6 was a mistake, that black should have captured with the pawn. And in actuality, it doesn't work out well. But on paper and in strategy, it's actually a perfectly legitimate idea. The idea being, of course, that if black could keep his pawns together and not cede white a square, then maybe white wouldn't have got the kind of advantage in his game. Let's just quickly look at that really quickly. What if black had played g takes f6 there? He had taken on f6 with his pawn. Well, since the time of Morphy, and I found this with the chess engines, but since the time of Morphy, we've known that when your opponent, you've already completed your development, in other words, you've already castled, and your opponent's king is still lagging behind you in development, and your opponent's king remains in the center, then one of the things that you should try to do is quickly open up the position as quickly as possible. Applying that Morphy rule to this position, we get the following continuation. White plays c takes d5, exclam, e takes d5, virtually forced. Black's trying to keep his pawns in a fairly good shape there, and then white plays e4. And now black can't double capture here. Simply, we'll just quickly look at that. D takes e, bishop takes e, queen takes e4. Of course, now we get rook e1, and the black king is pinned to the king. The queen rather is pinned to the king, and the black is going to lose his queen, and he has a completely hopeless game there. So this idea of g takes f6, recapturing on the f6 square, was one of those moves that was a good idea, on paper, but it just didn't work out well when you actually analyze it with any kind of, chess engine. And I'm afraid that maybe the person that sent me this email, I'm not sure if they checked it with a chess engine. I would say from the number of tactical mistakes I saw in there, some of the moves and ideas were pretty good, but from the number of tactical oversights that his analysis contained, I would just have to say that he did not use a chess engine. And that's not a criticism by any means. I mean, I think he was just expressing some ideas there, and I had asked for feedback on this game, but, nowadays, chess has just advanced so much. In order to be able to produce really solid chess analysis, you have to use a chess engine, and because a chess engine will catch a lot of the tactical ideas you might miss if you're going to do serious work on chess. But anyway, going back to the game, black played knight takes f6. Again, that was forced. That was the best move, and the engines confirmed that. And white just continues forward. He plays the move knight e5 here. This is a very nice move. He sticks his knight in the e5 square. That's called an outpost. He can back it up with f4 on the very next move, and you very quickly can see that white's dominating the game. In fact, if you really study Grandmaster chess in detail, what you will find is that a lot of games have themes. And what I'm finding here in this game is the more I analyze it and the more I look at it is that one of the themes of this game has become Grandmaster Wesley So as white is going to try to restrict black and then prevent him from ever getting this particular piece, the bishop on c8, the light squared bishop, LSB, into play. And that becomes a repetitive theme in this entire game. So anyway, white plays knight e5, black castles, and white plays f4. Now, one student, I asked a former student again to review this, and I even told several of them, don't use a chess engine, because I can use a chess engine. What I wanted was ideas. I wanted the human perspective on this game, and several people were nice enough to do that for me. And one of my students questioned this move. They said f4 was a very weak move. They said it actually weakens the king side quite a bit. And what one student suggested, he's actually a fairly strong player. He's about a Class A player, and he lives down in South Florida now. He suggested the idea of Queen C2. Certainly Queen C2, and the engines will verify that, gives white a solid advantage, and there's no doubt that that's a good move. But F4 is actually a very strong move. And let me just show you that move really quickly. Why that move is so good? Because of the fact after F4, as white's the knight again on E5 is almost inviolate. Black simply can't capture it, and it just basically it's going to cut the chessboard in half again, and also again the theme being to totally restrict this LSB from ever getting into the game. So white plays F4 here, and just quickly let me show you that, you know, because of the move F4, white's gaining space. The E5 square is secured. The light squared bishop is totally entombed. The board is cut in half. I already mentioned those, but that's basically a point by point. That's taken from my webpage on this game. And here's F4 shows you some of the ideas here for white, and you can see how some of the squares are affected. Now that the center is secure, white might bring his queen into attack. He might play a rook up and over. He might play a pawn storm, pushes g-pawn, and etc. You can basically get some idea of that. But anyway, white had played the move knight e5, black castled. White played the move F4 here. Again, that was strong pointing the E5 square. And now black basically has a decision to make. You know, he really doesn't have a lot of really good options. I thought about maybe playing knight D7 here. That's what I would have played, you know, if I'd have been black, but not sure that was, you know, the correct way to play this position. But I would prefer to have bishops only on the board. That's just my own personal preference. Get the knights completely off the board. I think that would make it harder for white to win. But of course, after knight d7, there's a very real threat that, you know, maybe white just plays a move like queen c2 or even queen h5. And if black isn't careful, he can quickly find himself under a very strong attack here. What Shirov does here is he simply plays bishop d7. That's just simply development. Black gets his bishop off the back row. He connects his rooks. He also has this idea of bishop e8, and maybe the light square bishop can get out and get into the game on the e8 h5 diagonal there, this diagonal right here. But anyway, so black is just basically he's continuing to mobilize his forces, and it's not a great move. It's not a move to write home and brag about, but at the same time, sometimes you have to have, you know, little simple moves and try to hold your game together. And also black's very close to finishing his development. And now white shows his ideas. He plays a move rook f3. And basically the idea of this move is, as the colorized arrows showed earlier, just click on that one more time, you know, you can see all those ideas. This rook f3 move, black played the move bishop d7, white plays rook f3. You know, one of the ideas here is simply rook to h3 and then queen h5, and black could find himself totally lost, you know, if he's not careful here. Maybe there's a sack coming on the h7 square. Anyway, long story short, you know, black simply can't allow something like that. He's got to be very, very careful there. Also, too, after rook f3, there's the idea of rook h3, g4, kicking a knight, and then queen h5, and that's almost certainly a winning attack for white. And I analyzed these ideas with the chess engine, and I looked at many different ideas. I'm not going to bother you with all that now because that was more thinking out loud and also checking that white does get a winning attack. But again, if you'll just look at those ideas with any chess engine, you'll quickly see what I'm talking about. I'm going to go ahead and cut that off here, and that will make this the end of part 3, and we'll just stop here with white's last move being rook f3, and we'll pick it up from there in part 4. I just want to thank you for watching this video series. The idea to annotate this game, and again, I already have a web page on this game, and the idea to do a video series on this game came from Wesley So's fans. They were very nice. They were very polite and very pleasant, and they just asked that I would consider doing this. And so, more than anything else, this is more or less a labor of love, an idea of just doing a game for, you know, to please a set of fans and you know, to see how good a job I could do with this. And I'm going to basically take as many parts as I need to. In other words, split this video up into as many parts as is necessary to cover the game in detail. And that pretty much does it for part 3. We'll pick it up in part 4. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.